Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Robby, and I'm going to be leading today talk on step 3, talking a little bit about what the step is all about, and then how you can kind of put that into practice, working through the Steps to Freedom workbook. So yeah, for those who can't see this video live when it's being recorded, welcome here. I hope that you've found the rest of the videos as well. And if you're jumping into this one now, maybe go back and find step 1 and start there, and then make your way forward. But yeah, our goal of this group is to demystify each step one by one, just make it a little bit more understandable. If there's any questions about it, or yeah, if there's anything about it that would seem hard and would stump somebody or keep them stuck, we want to kind of push our way through that. So the goal for today is just to give you a snapshot of what step 3 is all about. And I invite those of you who have the book, if you want to crack the book while I am going through this, highlight any kind of questions you have, or just kind of familiarize yourself with the material, so that you're ready to go when you're setting your time to work on these steps. And yeah, just treat that workbook like a journal. Just write your answers in it. And then if you are, reporting that to somebody else, I would encourage you just to read it out in the same way. Don't, expand on it too much. Just, write full sentences in there and answer the questions to the best of your ability. So step 3, the step as it's known, or as it is kind of defined, is we made a decision to turn our lives and our wills over to the care of God. And again, I attend a different local recovery group where we kind of put some scriptural verses associated with each of the steps. And so the passage that was kind of selected for step 3 was Romans 12:1, which says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship." So it's all about that sacrificial letting go of ourself or our desires and wills and giving it to God. So just as a reminder, the word "we" is used exclusively in the 12-step group, and that's important because the steps were made to be worked in community. A person doing recovery solo is very unlikely to kind of succeed getting through all of the material on their own and just being successful in that. So that's why we talk about the steps being a we. Each step is kind of designed that way. So now that we have humbled ourselves by going through steps 1 and 2, and that's really the whole purpose of those steps, we now have to redirect our lives towards our higher power and hand over the steering wheel, as it were, of our lives to God. Step 3 involves both a temporary and a permanent commitment or recommitment of our life direction to God and to His work in our lives. Not all recovery materials may find a distinction when it talks about or between committing our lives and our wills over to God, but I personally find this to be a very helpful distinction to make. So for instance, in elementary school, I committed my life to God. I prayed and I asked Jesus into my heart to forgive me of my sins and guide me and support me in my life going forward from there. This action was me turning my life over to God, which I later reaffirmed, as we do sometimes in life. If we kind of go astray for a bit, we can reaffirm our life. And for me, I did that in high school when I was baptized. And then I would say a second time I reaffirmed that when I came into recovery, and really, I feel like put a real context around the fact that I'm a sinner and I need God's grace. So committing my life to God was a one-time decision, and His grace allows me to access salvation for the rest of eternity. So turning our life over to God is one thing, and it's this kind of decision that we make hopefully once. And again, maybe our understanding of just the significance of that may grow in time, but ultimately we make a one-time decision to turn our life to God. My will, on the other hand, is an entirely different beast. I have committed my will to God tens of thousands of times, and then immediately changed my mind and taken my will right back. As I pray each new day, asking for God's will to be done in my life, I know that perhaps even later that same hour or minutes later, I will feel differently, and I will act in self-gratifying ways at the expense of God and others. And it has seemed in my own life that I am locked in a constant tug-of-war battle with myself as I allow my will to be guided intermittently by God and then my own sinful desires. So in spite of this struggle, it is essential that we get better at outsourcing our thoughts, actions, and decision-making to God, allowing his will to guide us day by day, and even minute by minute when we're in recovery. If left to our own devices, our will not lead us into recovery and health, but instead will just lead us further, deeper into our addiction. So really, I hope that's a helpful distinction to think of these two topics. There's our life and there's our will. And one is, fairly permanent, and one is, it vacillates and it fluctuates any given moment of any particular day. Understanding God's will is only possible for those of us who have asked God to be our personal Lord and Savior. If we think of it as a relationship, we can't be mentored by someone if we've never met them yet, right? So in the same way, we have to have a personal relationship with God if we're going to allow his will to guide us in our life. So if there are those who watch this video, either currently or in the future, who have not prayed a prayer, confessing firstly that we are sinful, that I'm a sinful being, that I ask God to remove those sins, and I ask him to, come and live in my life for the rest of my days, I would encourage you to do that. And that's really as simple as the prayer needs to be. It doesn't have to be anything flashy. But if you wanted more assistance with that, I would encourage people to speak to a local church or a friend who's a believer or something like that. And they can kind of walk you through that. But essentially, it's just a confession of our need for God, because we're sinful beings, and asking him to guide us and shape our lives going forward. But yeah, I would encourage you to do that, because like I said, you can't experience God's will in your life if you don't have him living inside you and impacting your decision-making, your mind, and kind of him giving you your will. So the image I find that is kind of helpful to think about this whole will and life battle is, or especially the will metaphor, is a car with a driver's seat. So the car, whoever's in that driver's seat, is making the decisions. They're turning left, they're turning right, they're slowing down, they're picking up speed, whatever. If I ask God to take the wheel, and then a minute later I kick him out and I take the wheel, what does that say about my ability to move forward in life? And what does that say in my life, or about my ability to trust God and to let go of things that I can't control, which is, so key in this whole journey. So again, that metaphor of kind of like who's driving the steering wheel of, or who's driving the car of your life and who's controlling the steering wheel, is, I find, kind of a helpful picture to kind of bear in mind with this image of the will. So we constantly have to get better at giving our will, the decision-making capacity, to God. So finally, the goals of step 3 are, one, to ask God to be our savior. If, we have to turn our life over to God. And again, that's kind of a one-time decision, but we have to start there. We have to commit our lives to further or forever relationship with him. We have to desire to outsource our decision-making in the moment to God. And we have to grow in our ability to allow God to stay in that driver's seat of our life. So those are the main, I would say, 4 points of step 3. And they're very important for us to kind of do. So we have to let God in and learn to just let him do what he's going to do, and not be micromanaging his actions in our life and taking back our will. So that's, I guess, the main summary of what step 3 is all about. I'm going to dive into the book just a little bit and just highlight a couple particular questions that, as I read through it, they kind of stood out to me as ones that maybe would be helpful for somebody else to hear somebody else's answer to. So the first one that I'll talk about is on page 29, which is the first page of step 3. And it's the second question that appears on that page. So page 29, the second question. So this question asks, as a sex addict, you have turned your will and life over to various things, persons, or beliefs over time. List those things, persons, or beliefs that you have turned your will and life over to in the past. So these are ideas, they're concepts, they're people, they're things that we've instead of giving it to God, we've given it to this person or this belief. So I wrote down 4 things here that it asked for. So firstly, I gave over my will and to the worship of women, and especially their bodies. When I think about what this addiction is all about, it's kind of determining that is like the utmost goal, or a goal that I want to achieve, is to have access to the female body or something like that. So that was an idol that I've created in my life in the past. So secondly, I've given my will over to my desire to be wanted and desirable to others. For me, thinking about addiction, there was always a sense that I didn't feel acknowledged or identified, perhaps by the opposite sex, and so I wanted to be known. I wanted to be cool or attractive or whatever. And again, I made that an idol or something that was more important than God. Thirdly, I gave my will over to the belief that pleasure would bring me joy and fulfillment. Kind of a hedonistic idea when I think of it, but it's this idea that if I'm not having the ultimate goal of my life is to have fun and to enjoy pleasure and fulfillment from that, or a belief that that would bring fulfillment. And finally, the thing that I gave my will over to was that I was God ultimately, and that I knew better than him. So it's that idea that I know better than God's will. My will is what's important, or more important than what God's will is in my life. So that was my answer to that particular question on page 29. And then the second one that I thought would be perhaps helpful to share is on page 34. So it's near the end of this step 3. And it is the second and third questions that appear at the top of that page, that say, what do you consider to be your life? And the first two questions that appear on that page: what do you consider to be your will, and what do you consider to be your life? And I've kind of highlighted some of the key parts of this in my sharing just a minute ago, but I'll read you what I wrote down for these two questions. So firstly, what do I consider to be my will? I said, my desires, wants, and wishes that motivate the decisions that I make each and every day. My thoughts and my feelings that inform the mood and the state of my mind on any given day. So that's my will. It's this temporary, ever-changing, fluctuating. It's like the tides in a river, right? Like it's constantly moving and changing and up and down and all that kind of stuff. That's, I guess, how I would define my will. So secondly, what do you consider to be your life? I said, my forever goal and the object of all my striving, and also where I go after this life. So again, the life is so much more long distance, long reaching, something permanent, something more unchanging, hopefully. So those were just two questions that I thought maybe confusing perhaps, or just a little bit vague. And so I decided to share my answers on those two. One thing I wanted to mention as well, for those of you who are going through this particular workbook, that I have noted in my own kind of journey through it, is sometimes you will be asked to list like 3 or 4 things on a particular question, and it's asking you to answer 3 or 4 little snippets. At times, I found that a paragraph style answer was more appropriate, and so that's what I did. So I would just say the important part is that you answer the question, whether you answer that specifically in the way that it's asked for with like 4 specific points, or whether you kind of want to write a more, linear sentence type format. Just go ahead and do it. The importance is to answer the question and to benefit from, just thinking like that. So don't get hung up on the format. Just make sure that the content that you provide is what was requested. So that's pretty close to the end of everything I have to say. Again, I commend everybody who's on this journey currently, whether in this group or watching it online sometime in the future. Keep on doing it. Don't get stuck. I was thinking this morning just how, the devil actually enjoys the fact that there's 12 separate sections in the steps, because there's ample opportunity for somebody to get stuck in that time and to kind of get discouraged or dissuaded or whatever. And I would just say, do everything you can to keep moving. Again, don't exhaust yourself on any one question. Do what you can, do what comes to mind, and then move on, and trust that God will continue to bring things up in the future if there's something that you have missed that you think is really important. But just keep moving. Don't stop for any reason. And again, I would encourage, if you have somebody you can report your answers to, a summary of some of the highlights, please do that, especially coming into the next step, which is step 4 and then 5. 4, 5, and 8, 9 are things that I would say are particularly essential that you share those with somebody. So again, just be thinking about that. And I think that's essentially everything I wanted to share here. So again, I just commend everybody who's on this journey and everything each of you are doing individually. Keep it up. It's really worth the outcome once it's all done, and it's it's a slow and painful process at times, but just keep going. And yeah, my prayers are with everybody who will be in any way observing or looking at this talk in the future. So I will end that there, and have a great rest of your day.